All right, good afternoon, everybody. So we're here on the live stream. It is Thursday, so we're getting close to the end of the week, and spring break's coming up. So tomorrow, finishing up the chapter today. Tomorrow we'll have the quiz, and then you have the next week off. So I appreciate all the hard work. I appreciate everything y'all are doing, and let's finish this week out strong, and then enjoy your break. We're going to give it another minute or so to see who else is going to log on for the live portion of this, and then we'll finish out the chapter. It's going to be a short one today because I want to give you time to study for the quiz, um, and then we'll close out the chapter, have the quiz tomorrow, and then break. So give it about another 30 seconds or so. Also, if you have any comments or any questions while the stream is going on, feel free to just type those in and I will address them as we go. Okay, so today we're finishing out the chapter. We're talking about civil rights and the civil rights movement after, for the most part, after the passage of the Civil Rights Act. Things to realize, and I've said it before in lessons for this chapter, is that racism still existed even after the civil rights victories that happened. So just because legislation is passed doesn't mean that the hearts of the people are going to change. So it's going to take a while. It's going to take quite a while to see the societal change that we've experienced today. That's going to take quite a while to see that societal change that we've experienced or are experiencing today, to see that come to Americans and all ethnicities and people. So that being said, though, there are sizable blocks of the populace that are pushing back. And this is going to lead to racial strife and racial tension. And one way this is shown is through race riots. And one of the more prominent race riots is the Watts riot in 1965. And there's a man with the last name of Watts, and he's beaten by a police officer for resisting. And the accusations are that this is police brutality. This is kind of very similar to the Rodney King riots later in the 90s. Um, so, in response, there's already so much social tension going on that society responds to this by mass rioting in the area that's occurred. And the riots last about 6 days, and it takes 14,000 National Guardsmen and 1,500 law enforcement officers to put down these riots. So there is just generally mass chaos over this. And this isn't the only race riot. Race riots occurred between 1964 and 1968 in many other cities. So this is just something that's a sign of the times and a sign of the racial tension of the times. In response to this, President Johnson organizes the Kerner Commission. So this is in 1965. The Kerner Commission forms, and their goal is to figure out why these race riots are happening. And so they do a study, and the study concludes that racism is partially responsible for these race riots, and that what could be a solution would be one, better inner city employment opportunities, and two, better public housing. Unfortunately, President Johnson is bogged down with Vietnam right now, and he does not follow the suggestions of the Kerner Commission. So they make the suggestions, they present their findings, but Johnson never really does anything with it. All right, now let's shift gears a little bit. A major push, which is a more radical faction of the civil rights movement, came in the form of the Black Power movement. And the Black Power movement, it's a form of African American pride or pride in one's African American heritage, and it's very similar. I think it's very similar to the Harlem Renaissance in the 1920s, where it's the same thing in the 1920s is pride in being African American. And there's new music, there's new literature, new art, and it's just an era of pride in the 20s. This movement, the Black Power movement, is less artistic and more socio-political. But there is a major push for this, and some of it's radical and some of it's not quite as radical. A major figure in this movement would be Malcolm X. So Malcolm X was a man who had been arrested, been imprisoned for burglary, and he reforms. This is transformational for him. So in response, as he reforms, he converts to the Nation of Islam. It's also referred to as Black Islam, around Afrocentrism and Black pride. Uh, However, it's a very forceful and very powerful movement in this era, and Malcolm X is a very prominent figure in the civil rights movement. He's very energizing. He's a very eloquent speaker, but he becomes disenchanted with the Nation of Islam over time, and he starts to separate himself or pull away from the Nation of Islam. In fact, seems to convert to. However, this uniting message isn't very popular among the Nation of Islam, so much so that a member of the Nation of Islam assassinates Malcolm X because they see Malcolm X as a sellout, and they don't feel like he's helping the Nation of Islam anymore, so he's assassinated. Also in 1968, in April of 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is also assassinated. So those are two major figures in the civil rights movement that are assassinated. Quite frankly, there's a third, Robert Kennedy, who was helpful in the civil rights movement among Latinos, was also assassinated in 1968. So we have three major figures in the civil rights movement who are assassinated. And it's a trying time for the nation. So that's it for today. That closes out the chapter. And what you should focus on studying, I would focus on several things. One would be Brown versus Board of Education, 1954, Rosa Parks and the desegregation of busing, Civil Rights Act of 1964, and Voting Rights Act of 1965. Also, I would make sure that you have a solid grasp, just be able to summarize, have a solid grasp on just the general course of the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s. So focus on those things as you study. If you have any questions, please email me. I'd be happy to help you out. Otherwise, everyone have a great day.